I remember the day my parents sat me down in our living room, as if it were yesterday. I was 7 years old, wearing my favorite purple dress with butterflies, holding my well-worn teddy bear close to me. The room seemed unusually quiet, and I felt something significant hanging in the air. Mom and Dad, usually so lively, were calm. Too calm. "Haley," my mom began softly, but with a kind of tension in her voice. "Your dad and I need to talk to you about something important." Her face was so kind, but I felt a growing unease in my little chest. Dad sat next to me, placing his hand on my shoulder, his gaze full of care. "We're not going to live together anymore," he said. His voice was steady, but I noticed his fingers trembling slightly. I didn't cry. Maybe I was too young to truly understand what was happening, or maybe their calmness had transferred to me. They explained everything in as simple a way as possible for a 7-year-old. The house stayed with Mom, and Dad moved into a new apartment. My life took on a new rhythm, one week with Mom, the next with Dad. Years later, I would recall that conversation as something almost unreal. There were no shouts, no hurtful words. Just a quiet, almost emotionless explanation. My parents seemed strangely perfect even in their divorce. It felt as if they had arranged everything so that I wouldn't feel slighted. But of course, that was just an appearance. About a year after the divorce, Dad introduced me to Sarah. We first met at a small local diner, where I was eating French fries, and Dad was nervously trying to organize everything. Sarah was calm, kind, with a warm smile and a gentle look. Sitting next to her was her son, Tommy, who looked a little younger than me. He lazily picked at his fries, then suddenly looked up and asked, "Will you be my sister?" I laughed then. It sounded too simple, but there was something sweetly naive in that moment. Sarah didn't try too hard to please me, didn't try to win me over, and it was that very thing that won me over. Around the same time, Mom started dating Richard. They didn't drag out their relationship, and he moved in with us fairly quickly. I noticed that Mom had changed. She became absent-minded, dreamy, often touching her stomach when she thought no one was watching. Soon she told me she was expecting a baby. I still remember the day Emily was born. Mom and Richard stood in the hospital room, glowing with happiness. Mom held a tiny pink bundle in her arms. I stood off to the side, shifting from foot to foot. It felt like I was watching a picture-perfect scene where everything was perfectly arranged, but there was no place for me in that story. While life at Mom's house revolved around Emily, Dad and Sarah got married. Their wedding was completely different. They made sure that Tommy and I felt like part of the event. I helped Sarah choose her dress, and even during the ceremony, Dad made vows and not only to her but also to us, his children. "I'm not just gaining a wife," he said, looking directly at me, "I'm also getting another wonderful daughter." Dad's words pierced my heart. For the first time, I felt there was a place where I truly mattered. That night, Sarah kissed me on the forehead before bed and whispered, "Thank you, Haley, for letting me become part of your life." I hugged her, already knowing that this would be my home. Though my life was unconventional, I understood how lucky I was to have at least one corner where I felt a sense of belonging. But life at Mom's house increasingly felt foreign. Mom left her job to focus on caring for the baby. The whole house seemed to revolve around Emily, as if everything else lost its importance. I tried to convince myself it was okay, since the baby needed more attention. But each time I saw Mom and Richard look at Emily with love and care, a quiet ache rose inside me. I started to fade into the shadows of my new life. Over the months, I began to forget. Not immediately, but gradually, as though a photograph left in the sun was fading. First, it was the small things, the favorite flower in the garden that Mom suddenly stopped watering, or a drawing I proudly brought home but that stayed on the table, unnoticed. Then, those forgotten moments grew larger and more significant. I remember standing outside the school one day in the drizzling rain. Thin drops streamed down my coat, and I watched as the other kids walked away with their parents. Their voices sounded like music, laughter, snippets of conversation, joyful whispering. And I stood there alone. Mrs. Johnson, my fourth-grade teacher, patiently waited with me for nearly an hour before she decided to call my mom. "Oh my God, today," my mom mumbled on the phone, and I heard her voice waver. "I'm so sorry, we had a mom and me session with Emily. Can we reschedule?" But we never rescheduled. Richard just picked me up that day, barely glancing at me as he spoke on the phone about some urgent business. His voice was sharp, clipped, as if I didn't exist. We rode home in silence, and I stared out the window at the blurred streetlights in the rain. Then came my 10th birthday. I woke up excited, with a flutter in my chest. I ran downstairs, sure that Mom would bake a cake or at least wish me happy birthday. But instead, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, holding Emily in her arms. Mom was feeding her porridge, smiling at the baby as if the world beyond the kitchen no longer existed. "Mom," I began, stopping in the doorway, "do you know what day it is today?" She glanced at me without taking the spoon out of her bowl. Her face was a little puzzled. "Tuesday," she replied. "Oh, right, I need to take Emily to the doctor." "Today is my birthday," I said, and my heart suddenly froze. Her eyes widened, and she pressed her lips together. "Haley, I'm so sorry. We'll celebrate this weekend, okay? I have so much to do today." But the weekend came and went, and no one remembered my birthday. No presents, no cake, not even a simple, happy birthday. I felt something inside me break. Not abruptly, but slowly, like a branch of a tree bending under the weight of snow. I spent more and more time at Dad's house. Sarah always made sure my favorite snacks were stocked in the pantry, and Tommy, my stepbrother, became a real friend to me. We played video games for hours or did our homework together. Dad didn't miss any of my school events, always finding time to talk to me, and Sarah took photos of me at concerts and competitions with such a sparkle in her eyes, it was as if I were her own daughter. Days at Mom's house felt more and more monotonous. She was completely absorbed in caring for my little sister. Richard came home from work, kissed Emily on the forehead, and disappeared into his office. My life there became a shadow of itself. I increasingly felt as though my absence went unnoticed. I wondered, if I disappeared completely, would they even notice? Eventually, I almost imperceptibly began to live with Dad. He and Sarah took care of me without asking unnecessary questions. And then one evening, Dad said, "I spoke with your mom. I think it would be better if you stayed here permanently. You're already here most of the time. I also told her that I'll stop paying child support now that you're under my custody." A few hours later, Mom appeared at the door. She looked anxious, almost nervous, but hugged me so tightly, as she hadn't done in a long time. "Haley, I've missed you so much," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought it over, and I want us to go back to our original arrangement. You'll spend half of your time with me, like before." But I was old enough to see her true intentions. Her words weren't about love or how much she missed me. It all came down to money. The child support from Dad became the main reason Mom suddenly wanted to have me back. I quickly understood this when the talk of love and "I miss you" turned into irritation the moment I walked into the house. Emily was 5 at the time, and it seemed like she absorbed the family dynamic like a sponge. She was smart, too smart for her age, and her little, sharp tongue became a weapon. She followed me everywhere like a shadow, and with a light, almost carefree smile, she dropped her little bombs. "Dad says you're not really part of our family," she told me one day, while I was sitting at the kitchen table trying to focus on my homework. I looked up, feeling my heart painfully clench. "You're just a guest," she added, pleased with her jab, pressing her lips together. I returned to my math problems, pretending I hadn't heard her words. But she kept going. Mom and Dad love me more. Last night Dad told Mom he's tired of having you here. And Mom said she's just waiting for you to turn 18. Then the money will run out, and you'll leave. Each of her words struck at my soul, leaving wounds I tried not to acknowledge. Over the years, I learned to build walls around that pain. I had Dad, who always held my hand, Sarah, who did everything to make me feel like part of a real family, and Tommy, who was more of a brother than anyone else. But to hear from my own sister that my mother was counting down the days until I left scars. The years dragged on slowly. I endured those moments until I finally reached high school. Graduation became the boundary I had long awaited, but it didn't bring relief. During the ceremony, I sat between my two families. On one side, Dad, Sarah, and Tommy, smiling and supporting me. On the other, Mom, Richard, and Emily, who seemed to be mentally packing up my things. After the ceremony, Dad hugged me so tightly that tears welled up in my eyes. "We're so proud of you, Princess," he said. But Mom and Richard immediately started talking about packing up my things. Even before we left the parking lot, Richard, jangling his car keys, grimly remarked, "Have you thought about how soon you'll be able to clear out your room?" They didn't ask about my plans for the future, or the college I'd been accepted to. They didn't care that I had a partial scholarship for a business program. They were only concerned with when they would be rid of me. 2 weeks later, I moved my things into Dad's house. I still remember sitting in the living room, nervously fiddling with my college acceptance letter. I was trying to find the right words to ask Dad for help with the expenses. I got into the financial analyst program, I began, stuttering slightly. "I have a partial scholarship, but..." Before I could finish, Dad and Sarah exchanged looks and smiles. Sarah pulled a neat folder from the drawer. "We've got it all covered, sweetie," she said, her voice warm and calm. "We started saving for your education when you were 8. It was as though a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I sat, staring at the folder with bank statements, feeling the warmth and care that came from both of them. That summer, I got a job at the Silver Spoon Cafe. I saved every penny to ease the burden on Dad and Sarah, although they never complained. The morning shifts at the cafe gave me enough time to spend with my real family. Tommy and I went to the movies and discussed our plans for the future. Sarah, smiling, taught me how to cook dishes that would be useful when I lived in the dorms. And Dad, as always, was there to offer advice or just give me a hug when things got tough. Mom, on the other hand, didn't call. She never asked about my plans or how I was doing. It seemed like she had long stopped noticing my existence. By that time, I had stopped expecting her to suddenly start caring about me. I no longer hoped for her love. College life overwhelmed me with a whirlwind of new faces, tasks, and responsibilities. My dorm room was tiny, with faded wallpaper and a creaky bed, but I found comfort in it. My roommate, Jenny, was nice, but we never became close friends. She was often out at parties, while I sat with my textbooks or worked at the campus cafe, trying to save every penny. Between classes and work, I barely had time to breathe, but I always made sure to call Dad and Sarah at least a couple of times a week. They visited me when they could. Tommy always came with them, pretending to complain about having to carry my laundry basket. But he would bring my favorite snacks from home, joking that it was his payment for the work. Their visits were true celebrations, filled with laughter, stories about life back home, and the family warmth I missed so much. Mom, by contrast, never called during my first year at college. Not even on my 19th birthday did I receive a call or a simple text message from her. I tried not to think about it, not to check my phone in hope of a message that never came. But old habits are hard to break. Later that evening, I made a mistake. I visited her Facebook page. Dozens of photos of her perfect family appeared on the screen. There they were on the beach, all smiling. There was Emily at her dance recital, with Mom proudly watching her. Holiday dinners, family celebrations, every image seemed carefully staged to showcase their happiness. I wasn't in any of them. I had been erased from their family portrait. The bitterness clenched me, but I quickly pushed it out of my mind. I made a decision. I didn't need their approval to prove my worth. I threw myself into my studies, work, and personal goals. The years passed by unnoticed. And then, there I was, standing on the stage, accepting my diploma in financial analysis. Dad clapped so loudly and shouted words of pride that I couldn't help but smile. After graduation, Sarah offered me a job through her brother Mark, who ran a successful investment firm. During the interview, Mark was upfront with me. "Your achievements are impressive," he said, reviewing my resume. "But I'll warn you, I don't offer privileges, even if you're Sarah's relative. If you want to make something of yourself here, you'll have to earn it, just like everyone else." "That's exactly what I want," I replied without hesitation. The work started with small tasks no one else wanted. But I worked hard, stayed late, and took on the toughest projects. I developed financial models, optimized strategies, and found creative solutions. The results spoke for themselves. The client portfolios under my management showed significant growth, and the company's profits increased. Mark, though strict, didn't overlook my efforts. He often made it clear that he valued hard work and professionalism. Bonuses and salary raises were well earned, and I knew they were the result of my efforts, not my connection to Sarah. The first thing I did with my first big bonus was to show gratitude to my real family. I bought Dad a new golf set. His old clubs had long been worn out. For Sarah, I gave a spa weekend, because she never spent money on herself. And for Tommy, I got the latest gaming console to replace his old one, which was barely working. When I handed them the gifts, seeing their genuine joy and surprise, something inside me clicked. Sarah, opening the spa certificate, gasped and laughed, covering her mouth in astonishment. "You never stop surprising us, Haley," she said, hugging me. Dad immediately began inspecting his new clubs, and Tommy, like a child, quickly turned on the console and started making a list of games we would play together. Those moments were real. And it was then that I understood what family truly meant. It wasn't just biological connection, it was those who are always there, who support you in tough times and genuinely rejoice in your success. Perhaps I had been cut out of one family photo album, but I had found my place in a better one. After 5 years of hard work, I had a clear plan. I saved part of my salary every month into a savings account and kept an eye on the housing market. I dreamed of a small house, modest, but cozy, with a tiny garden where I could drink coffee in the mornings. I wanted to make a sizable down payment to keep the mortgage manageable, and I was steadily moving toward my goal. But everything changed with one phone call. I was sitting at my desk, absorbed in quarterly reports, when the number I hadn't seen in years flashed on my phone screen. My heart stopped. There was no doubt, it was Mom. "Haley, sweetie, it's Mom." Her voice was sweet, almost sickly so. "I've been thinking about you so much lately." I nearly knocked over my coffee cup. 9 years of silence, and now this. "How are you?" I asked in a flat tone, trying to hide my confusion. "Oh, darling, I miss you, we all miss you. Why don't you come for dinner this weekend? Emily's back from college, and Richard's making his famous roast." Curiosity got the better of me. That Saturday, I drove up to the house where I had spent my childhood. Now I was behind the wheel of my own Mercedes, nothing extravagant, but reliable and suitable for a professional. Emily opened the door, looked me up and down, and coldly remarked, "Nice car." Not much had changed inside the house. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, and still no pictures of me. Mom rushed to hug me, her exaggerated joy almost theatrical. "Haley, darling, you look amazing, so professional in that suit. Right, Richard? She looks successful, doesn't she?" Richard, sitting at the table, nodded and pulled out a chair for me. "We've heard that things are going well at Mark's company. You must be one of their best employees." Over dinner, they bombarded me with questions about my job, my salary, my car. Mom kept making remarks about how hard it had become to make ends meet, especially with Emily in college. "Those are beautiful watches," she said, reaching for my wrist. "They must have cost a fortune." "They were a birthday gift from Dad and Sarah," I replied with a smile. Mom tensed slightly. "Of course, they've always spoiled you." Her voice sounded tight. The dinner turned into a series of invitations and renewed attempts to get closer. Mom began calling me regularly, sometimes showing up unannounced with Emily. They invited me to family dinners, and Emily, as if an inspector, would roam around my apartment, eyeing it with barely concealed arrogance. "This place is a bit small," she once said, casting a glance at the kitchen. "I thought you earned well." "It suits my needs," I answered evasively. "But you'll probably move soon, won't you?" Mom chimed in, her voice almost sly. "With your salary, it should be quite possible." I simply smiled and changed the subject. Their sudden interest in my life seemed odd, almost unsettling. One Sunday afternoon, Emily came over again. She explained that she wanted to spend time with her older sister, but her behavior revealed completely different intentions. She spent a long time inspecting the apartment, as if searching for something specific, and then, almost casually, she asked, "Have you been living here long? I wonder how much such an apartment costs. Do you rent, or did you buy it?" "It's not important," I replied, starting to feel uncomfortable. "I'm just curious," she continued with feigned innocence. "You could probably afford something bigger, right? You're probably just very frugal. Or, are you saving for something more important?" Her questions sounded too calculated. I began to understand that there was more to this than simple curiosity about my well-being. I was in the kitchen, making coffee, when I heard a long sigh from the living room. It was Emily. She was there, her voice almost theatrical. "Oh my God," she exclaimed, staring at my laptop screen. I turned my head. The banking app was still open on the screen. I had paid the bills and forgotten to close the tab. My heart clenched painfully. "Did you really save all that money?" Her voice was laced with feigned amazement, almost admiration. I quickly rushed over and shut the laptop. "It's rude to look at someone's personal information, Emily," I said, trying to keep my calm. She ignored my comment. "Why are you saving so much? What's it for?" I hesitated. On the one hand, it was my personal life, but on the other, I saw no harm in sharing my plans. "I want to buy a house," I finally said. "If I make a good down payment, the mortgage payments will be lower." Emily nodded, but her gaze remained tense. It seemed like she was mulling something over, and her silence was unsettling. Soon, she left, saying she was meeting some friends, but I already knew this story wouldn't end so easily. The next day, I received a call from Mom. She invited me to dinner. As soon as I sat at the table, I felt something was off. Mom looked at me with that expression I remembered from childhood, the way she looked at Dad when she was about to ask for more money. "Emily told me you're quite frugal," Mom started, passing me the potatoes. "That's great, darling. You're doing so well." I chewed in silence, waiting for her to get to the point. "You know, Emily is having trouble paying for college, and after graduation, she'll need an apartment. It would be so wonderful if her successful older sister could help." I put my fork down. I don't understand where you're going with this, Mom. She stopped pretending. Haley, everything is going great for you. You've got a stable job, savings. But Emily is just starting out. She needs help more than you do. It would be the right thing to do. I stared at her, unable to believe my ears. The right thing to do? You mean I should give Emily the money I've been saving for a house? Mom nodded in confirmation, and then Richard intervened. Well, you've already settled down. You have a career, and Emily is just starting out. She needs support. I firmly told you, I worked hard and saved that money to build my own future. I won't give Emily my savings. Mom's face darkened. So you're just going to let your sister struggle while you sit on a pile of money? After everything we've done for you? These words felt like a slap in the face. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her accusations. After everything you've done for me? I asked. For example, what exactly? Forgot my birthdays? Ignored me for years? Pushed me aside for Emily? Richard, not even looking at me, mumbled. A real sister would want to help. I stood up. And a real mother would be there for both of her daughters, I shot back. I take care of myself first. Emily is your responsibility, not mine. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom sat there, gritting her teeth, while Richard kept his eyes on his plate. Emily wasn't at dinner, but I could imagine her reaction when they later told her everything. Poor Emily, whose selfish older sister wouldn't give her a free apartment. 2 weeks after that dinner, everything changed. I had to go on a business trip to Singapore. Mark had entrusted me with an important presentation for a major client, and though I was nervous, I felt ready. The schedule promised to be tight, and the time difference meant I would be out of reach for most of the day. I'll be gone for about 10 days, I told Mom when she called. Her voice was a little softer after our recent argument. Just letting you know so you're aware I'll be out of touch. Oh, darling, overseas? That's so wonderful, she replied, and there was a strange tone of interest in her voice. The trip went smoothly. The client was pleased, and I felt a sense of professional satisfaction. But as soon as I landed back home and turned on my phone, a flood of notifications hit me all at once. Messages kept coming in, one after another, bank notifications about transfers. My heart skipped a beat. I opened the first message. Transfer, $1,750. The second. The third. The amounts varied, but they all took money from my account. The world before my eyes seemed to blur, and I felt my hands start to shake. I quickly went home, turned on my laptop, and logged into my bank app. The transfers were going to an account, the owner of which I recognized immediately, Patricia Warren. My mother's name. I felt heat rising from my chest to my face. Grabbing my keys, I rushed to their house, driving without paying attention to the road, replaying in my mind what I would say. Upon arrival, I got out of the car and, without hesitation, knocked on the door. Richard opened it, his self-satisfied smile only fueling my rage. Where is she? I demanded, pushing past him into the house. Mom was sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine as if nothing had happened. She looked up when she saw me. Oh, you're back. How was the trip? She asked, as if I had just stopped by for a chat. I held up my phone with the open banking app and shoved it in her face. What is this? I blurted. How did you transfer money from my account? She barely glanced at the screen. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied calmly. Don't lie to me. I shouted, pointing at the screen. It's all right here. Transfers to your account. How did you do it? Mom finally put the magazine down, her face changed. She smiled, not sheepishly, but triumphantly. Yes, I transferred the money, Emily needs an apartment and you refuse to help, so we just took what was needed. How did you even get into my apartment? My voice shook with anger. Mom didn't flinch. She pulled a key from her bag. Remember when I asked to use your bathroom once? I made a copy then. It only takes a minute. My heart skipped a beat. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat. Give me the money back, or I'll go to the police, I hissed. She laughed, loudly and sincerely. Don't be silly. You're not going to the police. I'm your mother. Besides, you have a good job, no obligations. Emily needs this more than you do. We've already found her a suitable apartment. Give me my money back, or I'll... I started, but she interrupted. Or what? You'll send your own mother to jail? Please. You don't have the guts. Richard stood up, roughly grabbed my arm, and began to push me toward the door. I think it's time for you to leave, he said, his voice as indifferent as ever. This is your last chance. Give me my money back, I warned them. Mom just waved her hand, and Richard slammed the door right in my face. An hour later, I was sitting at the police station across from Detective Martinez. My hands no longer shook as I filled out the complaint form. I documented everything, the unauthorized transfers, screenshots from the banking app, even text messages with my mom about my business trip. Martinez carefully studied the materials, nodding occasionally. We'll begin an investigation, Miss Warren, he said, finally looking up at me. And if your claims are confirmed, this will be considered theft. I sat there, feeling both relief and bitterness. My mother was right, it wasn't as simple as I had hoped. But I knew one thing, I wouldn't let them ruin my life. Richard called me that same night, and his voice, alternating between threats and pleas, sounded irritatingly familiar. You need to withdraw the complaint, he demanded. Do you even realize what you're doing to your mother? She's crying. You're breaking her heart. I silently hung up the phone. Let her cry. I had cried enough because of her over the years. Now it was time to deal with the consequences of her actions. The trial moved faster than I had expected. The evidence was undeniable, bank statements, screenshots of the transfers, even her confession to the theft. Mom sat in the courtroom, playing the role of a repentant mother. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her voice trembled as she said, I just wanted to help my younger daughter, she sobbed, addressing the judge. My maternal instincts clouded my judgment. I almost laughed out loud. Maternal instincts? When exactly did they appear? The judge didn't seem impressed. Mrs. Warren, he said in a cold voice, your so-called maternal instincts led you to commit deliberate theft and fraud against your other daughter. The only reason you're not going to jail is because you've agreed to fully compensate for the damage and have no previous convictions. She received a suspended sentence and was ordered to return my money within 30 days. The judge also approved my request for a restraining order against her and Richard. That gave me at least some sense of security. Dad and Sarah were by my side throughout this nightmare. They sat behind me in the courtroom, brought me dinner when I was too exhausted to cook, and supported me every step of the way. After the verdict was delivered, Sarah said, You did the right thing, Haley. They needed to learn that they can't use you anymore. Tommy, as always, tried to lighten the mood with a joke. Well, at least now you know who your real family is. And he was right. The lines were drawn clearly. I had my dad, Sarah, Tommy, and even Mark, who had been incredibly supportive throughout the whole ordeal. And on the other side, my mom, Richard, and Emily, who had shown their true colors in the most dramatic way possible. It's been 6 months since then. My money was returned to my account, earning interest while I searched for a house. I've now applied for a mortgage to buy a 3-bedroom colonial-style house with a cozy backyard, just 10 minutes from Dad and Sarah's place. This time, I'll be the only one with a set of keys. Mom has tried to contact me through mutual acquaintances and relatives. She claims she's changed, that she's sorry, that she wants to make amends. But I am no longer willing to give chances to people who see me as nothing more than a resource. Yesterday, I had dinner with my real family, celebrating the upcoming home purchase. We sat around the dining table at Sarah and Dad's house, joking and making plans for the housewarming. And then it hit me, sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you were born into. Letting go of toxic relationships is the most beneficial thing you can do for yourself. In 2 weeks, I'll sign the papers for my new home. Dad is already planning to help me paint the walls, and Sarah is sending links to furniture she thinks would be perfect for my living room. Family should be made up of people who support you, love you, and never hurt you for their own gain. As for Mom, Richard, and Emily, they can keep their perfect family photos and manipulative games. I have something better, a real family, a clear conscience, and soon, a home where only I will have the keys.